Welcome to On the Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC Denver, which goes down this weekend. The fight night in Denver, in Colorado. We've got some elevation, we've got some altitude, which always plays into the fight. So again, that's a real interesting aspect of this fight card, and one that you do have to take into consideration 100%. And of course, we've got some fighters on the card that fight in Denver, Colorado. So are they going to have that advantage training at altitude, training at that elevation, being able to fight without having to acclimatize, or, already having that good cardio because of how high up they train? So yeah, interesting aspect. And in regards to the card quality, the fight quality, we always seem to talk about this, and man, this event was looking bleak up until about a week ago. It only had 8 fights, and to be honest with you, those 8 fights really didn't scream too much in regards to excitement, if I'm being totally honest. Although again, like we always say, sometimes it's these cards that do end up delivering. But the UFC added 3 last minute fights. They added Drew Dober and Gian Silva. Gian Silva only fought on the last card 2 weeks ago against Charles Jourdain. They added Joshua Van versus Charles Johnson, and they added Montel Jackson versus Damon Blackshear. So those 3 fights honestly are really good fights, and I think that filled the card out quite nicely, if I'm being honest. So yeah, overall, I do think we've now got a decent card, and like I say, I always love these events up at altitude, up in the elevation. It just adds that extra spice on fight night. Now, before we get into the breakdowns, as always, if you want to jump into the action this weekend, then do so at MMA Play 365. MMA Play 365, you get everything in one subscription. You get all the handicapper advice, written breakdowns for the recommended bets. You get the official bets where my money is officially going, and then you also get the fun gamblers section as well, which has got pre-made parlays for you to bet if you don't want to do anything yourself, or if you do want to create your own parlays, then we've got parlay options where you can just pick and choose which fighters and which bets you want in your parlay, whether that be a 2-leg, 3-leg, 4-leg, or a 10-leg parlay. That's entirely up to you. But also included in that same subscription is Base AI, our UFC prediction software, which gives you a percentage prediction of every possible outcome and every possible fight on every UFC card. So that's all in one subscription. You've just got to choose whether you want to pay for one event, whether you want to pay monthly, or whether you want to jump on annually. And even that annually is only $99. So everything's affordable, everything's in one subscription, and that's all at MMAplay365.com. But now the introduction's out the way, the promo's out the way, let's get into the breakdowns. We've got 11 fights. I'm going to try and fire through these as quick as I possibly can for you guys. Let's get started. As always, in the main event, we've got Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez. Now, this fight was initially supposed to be Namajunas versus Macy Barber. Macy Barber pulled out. I'm not too sure why she pulled out. Can't remember if I've seen anything, whether it be an injury or whatnot. But yeah, I like that fight, but I kind of like this fight a little bit more. And actually, Tracy Cortez, although it appears like it's short notice, she was actually due to fight Miranda Maverick on the card next week. So she's only 1 week short of that full fight camp for her. So she's going to be more than prepared. She was already in fight camp, yes, for a very different type of opponent. Maybe that plays a factor. And also a different location as well. So yeah, and also a different amount of rounds. So yeah, I keep on adding to this list. So there are some differences here for Cortez. Like I say, 1 week short of the camp. I don't put too much stock into that. But doing the extra couple of rounds at elevation, those are 2 concerns straight off the bat because she wasn't preparing for that. So yeah, I mean, if she's gone over to Denver to train, which I believe she has done, then, she won't have got too much time at elevation, whether it matters or not. But look, Tracy Cortez isn't a fighter that, seems to struggle with cardio or anything like that. It's just her style of fighting is quite cardio reliant because she likes to wrestle. And look, I love Tracy Cortez. I love her style. Look, she made some improvements last time out as well in regards to her striking. Her striking looked really solid to the point where she actually didn't need the wrestling and grappling to win fights, which, she's not lost in the UFC. And pretty much every single fight that she's won has been due to the wrestling and grappling accolades and abilities that Tracy Cortez has. But last time out, she didn't need the wrestling and grappling to win, and that showed real good developments in her striking. But here against Rose Namajunas, look, I really wanted to pick Tracy Cortez to win. I'm just having a really hard time doing so because Rose Namajunas is a level above Cortez, in my opinion. And at some point, Cortez is going to level up and be on that same level as Rose Namajunas. I genuinely believe that. And that might be this fight. This might be the fight that we see Tracy Cortez really level up and really show that she's in and around where Rose Namajunas is, because Rose Namajunas at some point is going to start dipping a little bit in regards to the decline, and that's going to come. It happens to every fighter. Rose has been in and around the top of the division, at the top of the division for years and years. So at some point things are going to align between a fighter like Tracy Cortez and Rose Namajunas, but until I see that, it's hard to predict it. And what I'm actually seeing from a stylistic perspective is, when you look at the striking, I think Rose Namajunas is levels above Cortez. Even though Cortez, like I said, has leveled up with the striking, I still think Rose Namajunas is just operating on a different frequency when it comes to that striking. And I think if this is a 25-minute kickboxing fight, I think Rose absolutely pieces Tracy Cortez up. So I do expect Cortez to wrestle and grapple. And again, this is where the other stylistic problem comes in, because I do genuinely think that Cortez can take Rose down. But the thing is, these takedowns nowadays, in the eyes of the judges, just really aren't scoring that highly unless you do something with it. And the thing is, with Rose, she can be taken down. Like she was taken down 4 times last time out across a 5-round fight against Amanda Hebas. So I genuinely believe that Cortez will be able to replicate that and be able to get Namajunas down as well. It's just, the issue is, every time Rose does get taken down, no matter who it's by, she just seems to pop right back up to her feet very, very quickly. She doesn't lay flat on her back. She doesn't get settled on her back. And even if she does settle on her back for like a few seconds, she doesn't waste any time in creating a scramble, getting on a hip and looking to get right back up to the feet. Like, a jiu-jitsu's good. And like I say, I just don't see Cortez settling Namajunas. So if there is takedowns, I think Namajunas will get right back up to her feet. Then we're in the striking realm again, where Namajunas seems to be better. And I just feel that it's one of them fights where the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet striking. I think that Namajunas's defensive grappling is better than the offensive grappling of Cortez. So like I say, I do think Cortez gets takedowns. It's just I don't think Namajunas allows Cortez to do much with those takedowns. Therefore, they're not going to be scored that effectively. Unless Cortez is hitting like 5-6 takedowns a round, then that changes the dynamic of things. But again, I just don't see that happening. I think it's going to be 1 or 2 takedowns around at most. And I think Namajunas gets straight back up from them, does the better work on the feet, and that's what scores. So I can see potential accumulation of volume over the course of 5 rounds, maybe getting too much for Cortez and her getting finished. Or if she doesn't get finished and it goes to a decision, I just think Namajunas is going to have done the better work on the feet, and that's what will be scored over the slight wrestling moments and limited grappling moments. So for those reasons, I'm picking Rose Namajunas to win this fight. And in the next fight, the co-main event, we've got Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Muslim Salikhov. And I actually like this matchmaking for this fight because both fighters are definitely on the tail end of the career. They're both aging, they're both way past the prime. Like, Muslim Salikhov has always been a very skilled fighter, but was nowhere close to the level that Ponzinibbio got to in the UFC. Like, Ponzinibbio was up there, people talking about title shots and, dominating world-class fighters. But also Ponzinibbio right now is absolutely nowhere near that level anymore. And like I've said with Rose Namajunas in the main event breakdown, look, this happens to every fighter. Decline, it's a part of the sport, not just in this sport, but just in every sport. Like, athletes decline, and that's just what happens. It's the nature of being an athlete. And I like this matchmaking because I think both fighters are at the very same stage of their careers in regards to being at the tail end of it, aging a little bit and just nowhere near to where they were in their prime. It's just, I think Ponzinibbio is still that better version. I think that Muslim Salikhov is going to be, he's going to have some qualities in this fight. He's not going to be out of the fight. He's going to be able to be competitive, especially from a striking perspective. Muslim Salikhov's got a ton of striking experience, but I just didn't like last time out what happened with Randy Brown. Like, Randy Brown absolutely deaded him. And then a few fights ago, Li Jingliang did something similar, got knocked out badly against him. So I just don't know whether the durability is finally broken with Salikhov. Whereas Ponzinibbio, yes, he's getting hurt. Yes, he can be finished as well. And this is now an issue within his game that was never there before, especially in his prime. Ponzinibbio was known for being that tough, durable fighter that is very hard to get out of there. But like I say, naturally, age catches up to you. But I don't think the durability levels are as damaged as what I think Salikhov's might be. And then when you're looking at the power of both guys, I still think Ponzinibbio holds the power as well. Salikhov has got technique. That technique will never leave him, so that'll allow him to be competitive in moments in this fight. And actually, from a technique perspective, I think Salikhov might be the slightly better fighter, but Santiago Ponzinibbio's forward pressure, his size and his power should put Salikhov on the back foot. And once Salikhov's on the back foot, he's not going to operate at the same strengths as what he would be if he's moving forwards. Like, Salikhov is definitely a fighter that performs better when he can dictate the pace of the fight and the range of the fight and strike when he needs to strike, whereas Ponzinibbio, if he's closing that distance and forcing him backwards, he's going to put Salikhov in uncomfortable situations where he can't be fluid and flourish as much. And that's going to allow Ponzinibbio to get off on the strikes, some hard low kicks. And I think at some point, Ponzinibbio is going to find that punch that knocks Salikhov out. So for those reasons, I'm picking Santiago Ponzinibbio to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is a real interesting fight and a little bit tough actually in regards to be super confident in, but we've got Drew Dober versus Gian Silva. So like I said in the introduction, Gian Silva fought just last week, but last event, which was now 2 weeks ago, or will be 2 weeks ago when we get to fight night, and that was against Charles Jourdain. Now, Gian Silva took no damage in that fight. You know, he wasn't really busted up or anything, so I understand why he wants this fast turnaround, and I completely get it. The one element that I am concerned about with Gian Silva, though, is he missed weight for that fight. So I do think, I can't remember what he said. He said something in the post-fight interview of why he missed weight. I don't know whether he was feeling ill or something, but he did say there was a reason and apologised and it wouldn't happen again. But the bottom line is he had a fully scheduled fight last time out and missed weight, and now he's coming in on 2 weeks' notice and he's got to make weight again, but actually get there. Like, he can't miss weight in this fight as well. So, yeah, that's an interesting aspect of it. The other interesting aspect is, look, Gian Silva's stepping up in competition again. Look, Charles Jourdain was a big step up in competition. I actually bet Charles Jourdain at pick and money in that fight just because of that big step up. And look, like, Gian Silva proved that he was around that level of Charles Jourdain and he put on a really good performance. But this is another step up in competition. And it's not a huge step up, but I do think that Drew Dober, who was fought and beaten better quality opponents than Charles Jourdain and opponents that Charles Jourdain has beaten himself, I do think it's a step up in competition. And on 2 weeks' notice, I think it might be tough for Gian Silva, if I'm being honest. Like, Drew Dober also trains in Denver, Colorado, so he's going to be fully acclimatized. I don't foresee him tiring out or gassing out, whereas Gian Silva, again, 2 weight cuts in the space of a couple of weeks and then fighting up at altitude. I do think that there's going to be something in that. And if the fight does get stretched, then maybe we see Gian Silva slow down. So it might be a case of, look, Gian Silva's got a window of opportunity here. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 7 minutes. But I do think that the longer this fight goes into round 2 and into round 3, it's going to start favouring Drew Dober, especially from a pace perspective because of the altitude. And the thing is with Drew Dober, like, he's a very high-level fighter. Like, he's fought real high-level guys in the UFC and he's been mixing with these guys for years. I think from a striking perspective, Gian Silva's got this weird power about him where he can land and he can hurt you out of nowhere, but Drew Dober's fought some real powerful guys himself. Like, you look at the Terence McKinney fight. Again, the Terence McKinney fight, very similar to this. Everyone was super high on Terence McKinney. He was hyped. Everyone was super high on him. And then he comes in there against Dober. He knocks Dober down. He hurts him. And everyone's thinking, holy shit, McKinney's the real deal. But then Dober has that experience. He recovers and then puts McKinney out. And it's the same thing with Gian Silva. Gian Silva, I think, is going to be a popular bet this week for people because everyone's super high on him. He took Charles Jourdain out, which I don't think anyone was really anticipating him doing. And again, he's becoming a real fan favourite. And that's going to increase the amount of bets on him that we see. And again, this fight, the last time I looked, was a dead even pick'em, and I just don't think it's reflective of where both guys are at. I think that, look, I'm not saying Drew Dober should be out at like minus 200, but I think, you know, winning 6 times out of 10, minus 150, I think that's probably around where he should be. And like I say, he was at that point, but then all that money came in on Gian Silva, and I think Dober, from a striking perspective, he's tough and durable enough to take Gian Silva's shots. And Dober, I do anticipate him losing the beginning of this fight, but I think the longer the fight goes on, if Drew Dober's still there and not knocked out, it's going to start favouring him. And then even when we're looking at the ground game, the wrestling and grappling, like Gian Silva's got good wrestling, he's got good grappling, but Dober's been around the block, he's trained with some amazing fighters over the years. Justin Gaethje's training partner, we know that Gaethje's a high-level fighter, that rubs off on you. So, yeah, look, I faded Gian Silva last time out from a betting perspective with Charles Jourdain. Not quite sure I'm going to get there with Drew Dober, if I'm being honest, but it's very enticing, I'll say that much, because I think Dober's a level above, and like I say, I don't like the 2 week, the 2 weight cuts in 2 weeks, and then fighting at altitude as well for Gian Silva, and it's a step up in competition as well, so I just think there's a little bit of upside there for Drew Dober. So for those reasons, I'm picking Drew Dober to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Gabriel Bonfim versus Ange Loosa. And Gabriel Bonfim, I think a lot of people, I'd imagine a lot of people be calling Bonfim a bit of a fraud after last time out. Obviously, he was super hyped. You know, everyone was saying Bonfim is going to be up in the top 15, the top 10. Some people thinking he's going to go beyond that. And I'm actually one of those people. I was then, I still am now. I think that Bonfim's got a skill set where, and he's young enough where he's going to be able to climb that high in the UFC. And every single one of these fighters, bear in mind, you've got to understand Bonfim was, I think, 15-0 before he fought Nicolas Dalby. And it was just more of a shock for people because Bonfim was like a super heavy favourite. Nobody gave Dalby any sort of chance of winning the fight. And, you know, Dalby put a veteran show on and gave Bonfim that experience. Every single fighter that is a prospect, every single fighter that is rising up in the UFC will take this type of loss at some point, where it's not always the obvious loss. It's quite often, more often than not, the loss where nobody expects, that just gives a bit of a reality check to that prospect, and then they can flourish afterwards. And I genuinely think that that's what's happened with Bonfim. We've seen it a million times before, and Bonfim will lose again, but I think the next time Bonfim loses a fight, it will be against like a top 10, top 15 guy. And Ange Loosa, I think, is just a good rebound fight for Bonfim. Look, like I say, Bonfim got caught by surprise with Nicolas Dalby, in my opinion, not only for him but for the public as well. But he's genuinely a talented fighter. He's got a very dangerous grappling game. When he gets fights down to the mats, his submission game is dangerous. He can wrap up a neck. He can take an opponent out on the mat. His positional awareness and transitions from position to position on the mat is super high level, but on the feet he's got such good boxing, he's got good hands, he's fast in and out of range, he's got power as well in both of his hands. The only knock that I've got on Bonfim is I do think he can leave his chin hanging in the air a little bit, and again, when you start facing these top 10, 15 guys, it's going to be one of them that catches you if you don't fix that in the build-up to getting to be a ranked fighter or fighting the ranked fighters. But against Ange Loosa, I know Ange Loosa is powerful and he can chin check you, but I just don't think that it's a very probable outcome in this fight. I think Bonfim's going to be bigger, stronger. I think he's going to be faster on the feet. I think his hands are going to be better. I think his striking from a technical perspective is absolutely better than Loosa's. I think if Bonfim wants to take the fight to the mat, he can do. I think he's the better wrestler here. I think he's the better grappler. Again, I think Bonfim's got a lot of advantages in this fight. Ange Loosa is small, compact, but physically built, and he wings bombs. So that is something that Bonfim's going to have to watch out for. Loosa's a UFC quality fighter. He knows how to fight. And like I say, Bonfim, it's just a P's and Q's job for him. You know, mind your P's and Q's, be defensive, see the strikes coming from Loosa and strike in between it and perform in between it. And I think he's got a cruise job here. I think Bonfim will be able to knock Loosa out if he puts it on him enough, or if he does take him down to the mat, I think he'll be able to submit him as well. If the fight goes to a decision, I just don't see Ange Loosa out-voluming or out-pointing Bonfim, because the volume, I don't think, is on Loosa's side, and Loosa ain't going to be the one taking Bonfim down and controlling him and getting that top control time. So, yeah, whichever way I look at it, outside of that one bomb that just lands for Loosa, which is, again, a low percentage outcome in my opinion, I think Bonfim rolls. So for those reasons, I'm picking Gabriel Bonfim to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Christian Rodriguez versus Julian Erosa. And this is a really, really interesting fight because, man, wouldn't it be some shit if Christian Rodriguez hands the first loss to Raul Rosas Jr., then hands the first loss to Cameron Simon, and then hands the first loss to Isaac Dulgarian, and then fights a veteran in Julian Erosa where everyone is expecting him to absolutely roll, and then he fumbles, loses, and shocks the world that he hasn't been able to beat Erosa, when Erosa, no disrespect to him, but is probably not as technically skilled as any of the last three opponents that Christian Rodriguez has won against. And man, there's just something that feels so trappy about this fight. I can't really put my finger on it because, like I say, everything points to Rodriguez should absolutely be able to beat Erosa. But not only have we seen this situation before where the guy that's taken out all these real guys as an underdog wins and hands first losses, but then loses to the next fight where we all expect him to win. But Erosa's also been on the other end of that. Erosa wins fights where everybody expects him to lose. So, yeah, look, from both sides here, it feels super trappy. But like I say, Christian Rodriguez, Raul Rosas Jr. is a stud, in my opinion, still. And again, at some point, he was going to lose that fight, and he lost that fight to Christian Rodriguez. Cameron Simon, I know he got absolutely battered by Peyton Talbot, but Peyton Talbot's turning out to be a bit of a beast. So outside of that fight, Cameron Simon was looking the goods, and still probably is the goods. It's just he's fought 2 back-to-back fights against real legit guys. Christian Rodriguez missed weight against Simon as well. Simon still gave him a good fight, but Rodriguez handed that first loss to Cameron Simon. And then Isaac Dulgarian, I still think that's a bullshit decision. It should have been a draw at the absolute worst. And I bet Isaac Dulgarian there as well. So, I'm not too happy about that. I think it's one of the worst decisions that we've seen in 2024, which says a lot because there's been some terrible decisions. But still, Rodriguez on record has beaten Isaac Dulgarian, who in my opinion is an absolute stud and is one of the most talented fighters in the division, who will climb the division, a bit like what happened to Bonfim and what I discussed with him. That loss was a loss and he'll flourish from it and come back stronger. But with Christian Rodriguez, those 3 wins were really, really impressive. And then he comes in here against Julian Erosa, and it's a completely different fight because Erosa's not one of these young, hungry guys that's up and coming, that's undefeated and, really trying to make the mark and, climb the division. Erosa's been in and around the UFC for years now, in and out of the UFC, and I think Erosa's got more of a gatekeeping type of style at the minute, where if you beat Erosa, yes, you're going to go on and probably start fighting in the rankings in your next couple of fights, but if you don't beat Erosa, then you really need to reset and go again. Erosa's one of these fighters where he's not overly technically brilliant when you're looking at other fighters in the division, but he's so rugged and stoic. Like, he's a decent striker, he's a decent wrestler, he's a decent grappler, not only from an offensive perspective, but defensively as well. And he's one of these fighters that will absolutely upset the apple cart, but he's also one of these fighters where if you catch him on a bad day, then you're going to be able to run through him as well. So it's really tricky. I think Erosa's going to be a little bit more physical in this fight, which Rodriguez has struggled against before, like when he fought Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan Pierce was the more physical guy and he didn't quite get his way. But again, Jonathan Pierce is a really good wrestler and grappler, and that's where he got at Rodriguez, whereas I don't think Erosa's at that same level as Jonathan Pierce with the wrestling and grappling. So it's a real interesting fight. I think that Christian Rodriguez is the better technical fighter everywhere. I think he's better technically striking. I think his wrestling's better. I think his grappling's technically better. But Erosa is just so he's so hard to beat at times, and that's where it's going to become an issue. But I still think Rodriguez should, in theory, be able to, get through that stoic sort of aura that Julian Erosa brings to the cage, I think that Christian Rodriguez will be able to flourish in the striking if he's smart in and out of range. I think he'll have to deal with forward pressure from Erosa, but I think Rodriguez will be fine with that. And if Rodriguez is finding good strikes, good powerful and accurate strikes on the back foot, that stops forward pressure. So then he'll be able to advance on Erosa, and that's when we should see a bit of a turning of the tide. Where Erosa really gets at guys is when that forward pressure really starts hurting the opponent, where they're hitting him but he's still walking through the punches and still walking forwards, and that's what kind of breaks some of Erosa's opponents. But I don't see Christian Rodriguez breaking in that manner. I think Rodriguez, when he hits Erosa won't be walking forward through too many of them, and I think if he does, Rodriguez can level change. Maybe if he gets the takedown, great, or if he level changes, turns the fight, puts Erosa's back against the cage, breaks off and then starts striking again, just breaking up that forward pressure momentum what Erosa's trying to bring to the cage. So yeah, I have to pick Christian Rodriguez in this fight. I can't pick Julian Erosa, but like I said, we've seen this script, we've read this story so many times before, and it just would not shock me to see Erosa, quote unquote, shock the world in this fight, because he's done it so many times before, and I wouldn't be surprised. But on the same respect, when it comes to picking fights and predicting a winner, I can't look past Rodriguez because of what he's been doing against real studs, real young prospects. So different type of fight, but I'm picking Christian Rodriguez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Cody Brundage versus Abdul Razak Alhassan. And it's a very, very simple fight to analyse when you're looking at paths to victory and where both guys can win, because look, if Cody Brundage gets his wrestling and grappling going, I don't think Alhassan's going to have an answer to the takedown defense, and I think Brundage is the type of fighter that's going to be able to keep a fighter like Alhassan on his back, do good work, maybe look for a submission, land some ground and pound. But the thing is, on the feet, Abdul Razak Alhassan is the bigger, more powerful fighter. Absolutely one-punch knockout power. Brundage is a fighter that can be broken, has shown to quit inside the cage at times as well when things get a little bit too much. And yeah, Alhassan is the exact type of fighter that I could see Brundage crumbling against. So it's like, which fighter is going to be able to, you know, sort of activate their game plan and their path to victory? And it's a tough one to call for that reason, because look, if Cody Brundage comes in there and, you know, doesn't even throw a strike and just level changes and takes Alhassan down in round one and holds him down for 3 or 4 minutes, or maybe even the entire round, then Alhassan's going to be tired coming out into round two. He's going to be very hesitant striking because he knows if he gets taken down again, he's not going to be able to get back up. And on the flip side, Brundage knows that if he gets another takedown, he's going to win the fight as long as he doesn't get knocked out. So, and he's also going to have a lesser version of Alhassan, more tired, less power. But then on the same token, if Alhassan comes in there and lands the first punch that he lands, hits Brundage with the first punch that he throws, then Brundage is likely going to be hurt. If he's not hurt, he's going to wake him up to the point where he's going to be on the back foot, and he probably isn't going to want to come forwards and shoot takedowns because he's very hesitant of the power coming back at him. It's for me, it's one of these fights where, you know, it could literally just go either way. And I know that's a bit of a cliche, but it's a tough one to call, because like I say, both fighters have big weaknesses where their opponent has big strengths. So yeah, look, for me, I've got to make a prediction. I'm not going to sit on the fence. I'm going to side with Alhassan. I think Alhassan, if he lands something early, all fights start standing. That's an advantage to Alhassan. If he lands something early on Brundage that just rocks him or hurts him or stuns him, then I think Brundage might get a little bit hesitant, backs up against the cage. Alhassan lands a combination. Maybe the combinations are hitting the arms, they're not landing, but then Brundage turtles up against the cage. The referee might even stop it stood up if Alhassan doesn't knock him out. But like I say, don't be shocked if Alhassan throws a big overhand right and Brundage ducks under it, takes him down and wraps him up from there. But like I say, I've got to take a pick on one of these fighters. I'm going to side with Abdul Razak Alhassan to land the knockout shot. So for those reasons, I'm picking Abdul Razak Alhassan to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is one of the fights that I mentioned in the introduction that was added to the card late, and it's a very very good fight. We've got Joshua Van versus Charles Johnson. And it's one of these fights where I think you can actually make an argument for both guys here, because for as impressive as Joshua Van has been in the UFC, very young, bright prospect. We all know he's going to be in and around the top 10 in the future. It's just, is that going to be in sort of 5 years' time rather than 18 months to 2 years' time? And with Charles Johnson on the other side, he's been in there. He's been in the UFC for much longer. He's fought top quality opponents. He's lost against some of them as well, but he always seems to be relatively competitive, and he's got a real hard to beat type of aura about him. A little bit like Julian Erosa that I mentioned earlier on. So the thing is, for Joshua Van, like, this might be the best opponent that he's fought in Charles Johnson, and it's how he deals with that. But Joshua Van doesn't seem to be the type of fighter that, worries too much about what's in front of him. He focuses on his own game. He's super confident. And yes, he's got some holes that he needs to fix, like in that fight with Kevin Borjas. Borjas hurt him early on, but Van recovered pretty well. And to be honest with you, after Van got hurt, he was then the best that we'd seen in that fight. He poured it on Borjas, went forwards, and was just an absolute nightmare. Like, when Borjas hurt Van, at that point I thought, okay, well, Borjas is going to go on to win this fight. But Van recovered really well, and it also shows you that, Van can go through adversity, overcome adversity, but not just overcome it, but overcome it and then win fights after it as well. And even this early in his career, having seen the fact that a fighter can overcome adversity and come back and look better in that exact same fight, it's something that's really good to see, because sometimes with these prospects, you don't see them, having to overcome adversity or deal with adversity until after a good number of fights. And again, until you see that adversity, you don't really know how they're going to react to it. But we know that Joshua Van has got a solid mindset, has got good recoverability, and he's able to channel back into the fight once things aren't going his way a little bit, which, like I say, is always good to see with these prospects. Now, with Charles Johnson, I think is going to be more physical in this fight. I think that, again, just like I keep mentioning it with Julian Erosa, Charles Johnson's stoic. He's got a good all-round game from both an offensive and defensive perspective. Good striker, wrestler, grappler. He's pretty much across the board very good. The thing is with Joshua Van, and I think one thing that's going to separate him in this fight from Charles Johnson, is the ability to not get overwhelmed with Charles Johnson's physical presence, and the fact that Johnson has been in there with better guys. And what I think Van's going to do, and what's going to allow him to really flourish in this fight, is the forward pressure, because I don't think Johnson's going to back off straight away. I think it might be a case of both of these fighters meet in the middle quite a lot, but I like Van's bodywork, and I think once Van starts mixing to the body and to the head and starts to land clean on Johnson, that's what's going to force Johnson to start slowly but surely moving backwards a little bit more the longer the fight goes on. And this forward pressure from Van, I think that Van's just going to keep going and going and going, forward, in your face, ripping combinations, body, head, chop the legs down, maybe mixing a couple of takedowns. Charles Johnson's difficult to take down, and if you do take him down, unless you're a really good topside grappler, he'll get back up. But maybe even, if Van's coming forward, lands body, head, leg kick, bang, shoots a double leg, gets a takedown, Johnson gets back up, they separate, they go again. I think it's just going to be a ton of action, volume and momentum in Joshua Van's favour that's just going to allow him to really start looking great the longer the fight goes on. And look, Charles Johnson's absolutely going to be in this fight. It's going to be competitive. If there's not a finish in this fight, which I'm not quite anticipating, if I'm being honest, if there's not a finish and it goes to the scorecards, which fighter do I think is more likely to win 2 out of the 3 rounds? I think it's more likely to be Van. So for those reasons, I'm picking Joshua Van to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jasmine Jasudavicious versus the newcomer Fatima Kline. Now, Fatima Kline was supposed to be on Dana White's Contender Series in September, I believe. Could be wrong about that, but definitely she was going to be due to be fighting on the Contender Series. I might just be wrong about the date, but I'm pretty sure it was September, which means that stepping in on short notice, she won't have had too much of a fight camp for this fight. Normally, like I say, with Tracy Cortez, in the main event, that's a bit different. Like, she was due to fight a week after this event, so her fight camp was coming to an end this week anyway. Whereas Fatima Kline, her fight camp, I believe, will have probably just started, her official fight camp anyway. Jasmine Jasudavicious was supposed to fight Viviane Araujo, and to be honest with you, Araujo and Kline don't have too dissimilar in styles, so Jasudavicious training for Araujo is not going to go a million miles away from what she's going to get from Kline. But Kline's a real prospect in the division, 6-0. It's a real good signing from the UFC, and I'll tell you who she reminds me of. Same situation as well, is if you go back a couple of weeks ago, we had Felipe Lima. Now, I love the signing of Felipe Lima because he was a very good striker, good wrestler, very good grappler. He's just so good everywhere, and he's a ball of energy, ton of action, constantly going forwards, looking to be offensive no matter where the fight goes, and I love that aspect about him. And also, Lima moved up in weight to make his UFC debut to fight Naimov on short notice. And the same thing is happening here with Kline. She's a ball of energy. She's absolutely good everywhere. She's an elite grappler, fought a ton of high-level grappling competitions. She's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. She's got good wrestling, good double legs, but then she's got good throws. She's got good trips. And her striking has come on leaps and bounds again. If you watch the tape in chronological order, you'll see her striking getting better. And now she's one of these fighters that looks like a predominant striker on the feet, but actually she's not. And yeah, man, like she's a super talented fighter. The only concern here, moving up in weight, the same concern I have with Felipe Lima when he fought Naimov in his UFC debut. So she's moving up in weight. It's short notice. And again, the elevation might come into this, but look, I've seen nothing from Kline in regards to fighting at a high pace over 3 rounds. She also fought Laura Gallardo, I think it was, in Denver, Colorado, going 3 rounds. And again, that was high paced with a ton of wrestling, a ton of grappling. Didn't look tired over 3 rounds there. So I've got there's nothing to suggest to me that Kline is going to suffer cardio wise here. It's just short notice, upper weight class. But again, Jasudavicious, although she's big for the division, Kline's going to be pretty much the same height, the same reach. And, when you look at them, they look very similar from a physical perspective as well. So I just don't know how much an advantage Jasudavicious is going to have fighting the fighter coming up in weight, because it looks like Kline is a very big fighter that cuts a lot of weight to get to the division that she wants to fight in. So, look, from a skill perspective, Jasudavicious has got a wrestling background. We know she can wrestle. She's a good grappler as well, very positionally aware. But these are areas where I think that Kline's going to be better in. Like, Kline fought Gallardo. Gallardo had a catch wrestling background. Kline was very good in those catch wrestling positions where she was able to get the fight down to the mat and she was able to do good work on the mat. I think that Kline's going to be the better grappler over Jasudavicious. I think when it comes to the wrestling, I think if Jasudavicious does take Kline down, even though Kline's shown good takedown defense, Kline's got good jiu-jitsu to get back up to her feet, sweep or reverse. And then even the striking, like Jasudavicious can be efficient and effective with, long straight punches, jabs, 1-2s. But I think Kline's the better striker here. It's just like I say, the only concerns from Kline's perspective is the short notice and upper weight class. But outside of that, I think Kline's the better striker. The wrestling can be matched either side. And I like Kline's grappling, and she's a legit jiu-jitsu black belt as well. So I'm actually going to side with a newcomer here. I'm picking Fatima Kline to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Luana Santos versus Mariya Agapova. Mariya Agapova we've not seen for a couple of years. She fought twice in 2022 and then sort of just disappeared off the scene for a couple of years. I don't know whether that's injury related or whether she's just taken some time off to improve and get a little bit better. Back-to-back losses against Marina Moroz, and then of course last time out against Gillian Robertson. And to be honest, neither are really bad losses. Like, Marina Moroz is okay at this level in the UFC. Gillian Robertson, we know, can be an absolute nightmare for certain styles of opponents. But ultimately, Agapova's had a bit of an up and down career in the UFC where she's come in, she looked dangerous, she looked solid, and then she got way overconfident against Shayna Dobson and got beat by Dobson, in a pretty brutal way, and then she won again in the next fight, but then now she's on back-to-back losses, and what's she been doing for the last 2 years? Whereas Luana Santos is a very good fighter, solid everywhere, fought 3 times in 2023 alone. Obviously, this is the first time she's fought in 2024, but again, Santos is a fighter that'll be getting better as well. Her striking looks like it's gotten so much better over the last few years. She's got a good wrestling game, good grappling game, topside grappling, and this is where I think that Agapova is going to have real problems in this fight, because from a striking perspective, I think Luana Santos is going to be able to, at the very, very least, match Agapova's striking, but then Agapova can be taken down, she can be controlled. That does seem to be a bit of a weakness in a game, and Luana Santos is very strong there, so I think there's a very clear path to victory here for Santos with the wrestling and grappling. And then when you look at the striking as well, I don't think she's a million miles off Agapova. She might even be a better striker on any given night. So yeah, I think it's a tough night for Agapova, a tough fight for Agapova as well. I think Santos is very skilled and good in the areas where Agapova's weak. Santos has just got to fix that weight cut issue that she had last time out. She makes weight, she's nice and big in there. I think she's able to get the takedowns and the top control time that she needs. So for those reasons, I'm picking Luana Santos to win this fight. And in the next fight, this was another one of those late notice fights that the UFC added to make the card really, really good. We've got Montel Jackson versus Damon Blackshear. And this fight, it's a tough one to analyse because, look, Montel Jackson, when he first came to the UFC, there was a ton of hype on him. And, it's not as if he's actually done even that bad since then. He's lost 2 fights. He lost his debut to Ricky Simone, which, Ricky Simone is going to do that to you, especially the Ricky Simone of a few years ago that seems to be way more relentless than what he is right now. And then he lost to Brett Johns. That was the one where a few people were quite shocked and surprised. Jackson was a big favourite, but again, Brett Johns has got that style of the wrestling and grappling that's enough to beat somebody like Montel Jackson. Where Montel Jackson's good is with, his speed, fighting at range, using his length, in and out of range, of course, as everybody knows due to the commentary, and they'll say it again this week, maybe not use the exact name, but he has the same size hands as Francis Ngannou, and, he's got power. And Montel Jackson was, again, this really hyped fighter, but then he took the loss against Simone. I don't think anyone really held that against him. He came back straight after against Brian Kelleher, finished Brian Kelleher, and then there was some hype on him. Then he sort of lost it a bit with the loss to Brett Johns, and then he started putting some good performances together, but then the performances stopped being as exciting, and there were just wins and, solid wins nonetheless, but I just don't think he's materialised yet into the fighter that a lot of people are expecting. Maybe, including myself, people put a little bit too much pressure on him to be better than what he was always destined to be. Like, I know some were saying he's a small version of John Jones, and even saying that piles on a ridiculous amount of expectation on a fighter that they're probably not going to be able to realise that potential. And yeah, it's just a bit of a strange one with Montel Jackson. And even though I was super high in him at the start, and I was one of these people that said that he's one to watch in the division, I'm not going to shy away from that, he kind of hasn't materialised into the fighter that I thought he was going to. And, that's not his fault, and it doesn't mean he's a bad fighter. It's just maybe my expectation levels were much higher of him than what he was going to achieve. I just don't know where I stand on Montel Jackson, because he's a good fighter. It's just he's beatable against the right level of opponent. And you look at someone like Damon Blackshear. Damon Blackshear's striking's decent, his wrestling's good, his grappling's good, and I think that Jackson's a fighter that is genuinely getting better sort of day by day. And I know this is a short notice fight, but he's done a few weeks at Tiger Muay Thai, I believe, in Thailand, so he's more than in shape for this fight. I can't put my finger on Montel Jackson. I'm just not sure. Like, I think he's going to be the slightly better striker in this fight, but the thing is with Blackshear can hit takedowns, and he's got a very good grappling game. And where Montel Jackson's been beat in the UFC is by being taken down, is by being out-grappled. Now, in all fairness to Jackson, when he is taken down in these fights, he can get back up to his feet, and he does get back up, but the more he's taken down, the slower the get-ups are getting, the less likely they're going to happen, and you see the fighter who's scoring the takedowns slowly start to do better and better work. And I think that Blackshear, his wrestling background and the fact he's a good grappler, is going to put him in a good position to win this fight. I think that he's going to be able to get takedowns, but in between these takedowns, he's also going to be getting hit as well. So Jackson's going to be doing good work in and around the good work that Blackshear does. I think it's a pretty close fight. I think it's one that is going to be determined by the fighter that just does that little bit more, that just changes the course and the direction of the fight a little bit more. And I feel that that's more likely to be on Blackshear's side. I think if Blackshear isn't affected by the altitude and isn't affected by, shooting plenty of takedowns and getting tired because he's fighting in the elevation, I think Blackshear will be able to get the takedowns he needs across the across the rounds, and get the top side he needs in the fight as well. So yeah, super close fight. Wouldn't shock me if Montel Jackson, won this fight just by doing the better work on the feet and, the judges not really scoring the wrestling and grappling of Blackshear. But I do like that Blackshear's prepared. I do like that he's been in Tiger Muay Thai, fixing up it, sharpening his striking tools, giving him that extra arsenal in this fight. Because if he can match the striking of Montel Jackson, the wrestling and grappling is going to go his way, in my opinion, and he'll look good in the fight. So yeah, look, I'm slightly siding with Blackshear here. I'm picking Blackshear to win this fight. And in the final fight to break down, the first fight of the night, it's actually a really good fight. We've got Josh Fremd versus Andre Petroski. And Andre Petroski, I think he opened the favourite in this fight, slight favourite, and all the money's coming on Fremd to the point where the line's flipped and now Petroski's an underdog. And I kind of get it in one way because, look, I mentioned this a few times. We're in Denver, Colorado, high altitude, fighting in elevation. It's going to make It's going to make fighters more tired than usual. And the thing is with Petroski, and everyone's going to be saying the same thing, Petroski's gas tank is very suspect. His cardio is very suspect, but he does some things that doesn't help him in the fights that he gets tired. Like he's winging big bombs early in fights, missing, so swinging big bombs at air, that's tiring him out. And then he goes to wrestling, and then he's wrestling really heavily. That will tire him out, but that only really tires him out when there's some resistance on the other end. So when the fighter's defending the takedowns really well, then he can get more tired because he's having to work hard, work overtime. To be fair to Petroski, even when he's tired, he'll give 1.5, maybe 2 rounds solid, but then that third round he's very, all over the place, gassed out, susceptible to being finished himself just by being exhausted. So there's definitely a red flag on the cardio of Petroski, but like I say, there's been other fights where he's looked absolutely fine. Even the Meerschaert fight, like Meerschaert, there was some wrestling and grappling in that fight. There was definitely a lot of resistance from Meerschaert. And although Petroski did slow down and tire out, he didn't exactly slow down and tire out to the point where he was nearly getting finished at every opportunity in round 3. Towards the end of the fight, the end of round 3, yeah, he was a bit all over the place there, but, there was literally only like 30 to 60 seconds left. And then in the fight with Wellington Turman, I actually bet Turman in that fight. Petroski looked really good over 3 rounds, wrestling, grappling, doing what he needed to do. In round 2, he looked like he was slowing down significantly, but then round 3, he hit a second wind and came out and looked great. So it's not all downhill in regards to Petroski's cardio. Like it's not a complete red flag where it's like, oh my god, you cannot touch Petroski because he is absolutely going to gas out. The thing is with Josh Fremd will provide some resistance, and this is where there's a little bit of hesitancy with the pick of Petroski because Fremd will provide some resistance. However, when you look at the fighters that have been able to take Fremd down, it's actually pretty shocking. So Jamie Pickett took Fremd down twice. Now Jamie Pickett, no longer with the UFC, was aging a little bit as well, but absolutely not a wrestler. Absolutely not a wrestler. Then you look at Trajan Gore. Trajan Gore took Fremd down 3 times. Trajan Gore, I think, was like 4-2 in professional mixed martial arts when he fought Fremd. Trajan Gore was also a striker. Absolutely not a wrestler. We saw no wrestling or grappling from him in any of his previous fights, really. takes Fremd down 3 times and then submits him as well. So again, that's a concern. Anthony Hernandez took Fremd down 8 times. Now, Hernandez is more of a wrestler, granted, but Andre Petroski has a wrestling background. He's a legit BJJ brown belt, and I know that doesn't sound as great as a black belt, but he's a brown belt under Daniel Gracie, competes in grappling competitions, trains in gi every single week. So this is a real BJJ brown belt. So if Fremd is getting taken down by Jamie Pickett and Trajan Gore, took down 5 times between Pickett and Gore, then I think that Petroski is going to be able to get the takedowns he needs as well. The other thing that I noticed from tape here is that Josh Fremd, in between the grappling moments and the scrambles and getting back up to his feet, he tends to end up in a lot of defensive front choke positions where his opponent's got a hold of his neck. And look what Andre Petroski did against Maximo. When Maximo presented his neck once, it got wrapped up super early in the fight. And the thing is, this isn't just one instance. This is multiple instances in multiple fights as well. And that's also how Trajan Gore ended up getting Andre Petroski as well, with a choke, because Fremd gave him the neck. Petroski will eat that up for breakfast. And now just quickly flipping back over to Fremd. Actually, with Fremd striking, I think the striking's going to be a big difference in this fight. I think Fremd will be the much better striker. I think he'll land more frequently, but it's just how frequently he's going to be able to land because of Petroski's willingness to wrestle and shoot takedowns. Like, if Petroski's on top of Fremd for the majority of the round, well, the striking that Fremd's going to do at the beginning of the round has probably gone out the window, and the momentum's flipped over to Petroski's side. It's just with Petroski, how tired is he going to be in that round 3? How much is Fremd really going to make him work? And I think that's the reason why Petroski's the underdog in this fight, because especially up at elevation with some question marks and red flags on the cardio of Petroski, I think people are thinking, because obviously the betting lines move because of public bets. So I think people are betting on Fremd and thinking that, no matter what Fremd is going to have to deal with from a wrestling and grappling perspective, the longer the fight goes on, the more it's going to favour him. But the thing is, if Petroski's on top of Fremd in a round and Fremd's not really providing too much resistance from a defensive grappling perspective, and then he's presenting submission opportunities with the front chokes to Petroski as well, I think there's upside on Petroski there. Like I say, I know there's cardio issues, especially at elevation, but again, I think the more skilled fighter here is Petroski with that, the brown belt in jiu-jitsu and the wrestling background. I think he's the better athlete, and from a skill gap perspective, I think the biggest gap in skill is within that wrestling and grappling, and that's on the side of Petroski. I'm picking Andre Petroski to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Money Line. As always, thank you for tuning in. I always really appreciate the listeners. I also appreciate the comments as well in YouTube. Whether we agree or not, that's a part of this sport. Everyone's always going to have a difference of opinion, and it's great that people are connected. It's great that people can discuss. Obviously, if it's done in a respectful manner, I'll always reply onto the YouTube comments. Tell me who you're betting over there. Tell me where we disagree on the picks. Please jump into the YouTube comments. Let's have a conversation. I am busy throughout the weeks, but I always try and, get back to those comments, and it is me that replies to those comments on YouTube. Of course, if you listen on one of the streaming platforms like Spotify or Amazon Music, Apple Music, you can jump over to YouTube as well and have that conversation and subscribe to the channel there as well. And last but not least, for the last time, if you are wanting to jump into the action this weekend from a betting perspective, make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com, where we've got something for everybody, whether you're a long-term gambler, a fun gambler, or whether you are just wanting to bet on exactly what I bet on, or whether you're just wanting to be really interested in the AI, see what the AI is predicting, and bet according to where the AI favours. Then everything's in one subscription at MMA Play 365. Just choose next event, monthly or annually, and you'll be on your way. Super easy to use, everything in one place, super affordable. That's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome, thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.